When I first purchased the land beside Willow Creek Lake, I never imagined the battles I would face with the Homeowners Association. My grandpa had lived on his ranch beside the lake for decades, and I grew up spending summers there, fishing, swimming, and learning the value of hard work under the warm sun. The lake was more than just water. It was a lifeline of memories and a sanctuary for my family. But all that changed when the HOA decided to expand its control. After years of relative peace, a new president took over the HOA, Margaret Whitaker. She was known around town as a control freak, obsessed with perfection, power, and rigid rules. The moment she assumed power, new regulations started pouring in like an unrelenting storm. Signs were posted limiting lake access. New permits were required for dock usage, and heavy fines were slapped on anyone who didn't comply. The final blow came when the HOA installed a locked gate, blocking the old dirt road Grandpa had used for years to access the lake directly from his property. That gate was like a slap in the face to all the hard work Grandpa had put into this land. He tried reasoning with Margaret, but she dismissed him with condescending lectures about community standards and environmental impact. Grandpa was heartbroken, but I was furious. This was our land, our legacy, and I refused to let some self-appointed dictator trample on our rights. I spent weeks researching the HOA bylaws, property lines, and water rights. With James, my old college friend who happened to be a brilliant environmental attorney, we uncovered a fascinating detail. While the HOA controlled the immediate lakeside lots, they had no legal claim over the upstream water source that fed, Willow Creek Lake. That source ran through a section of land I had quietly purchased years ago, directly feeding the HOA-controlled lake and maintaining its water levels. If I couldn't get Grandpa's access restored through reason, maybe I could use the law and nature to level the playing field. The plan was complex but entirely legal. Working with hydrologists and engineers, I designed a small but effective water diversion system upstream on my land. It would reroute a significant portion of the creek's flow into a separate reservoir I constructed further south on my property, still within my legal rights. The remaining flow into Willow Creek Lake would drop considerably, lowering the lake's water levels over time. As the plan was executed with precision, I kept a close eye on the lake. Within a few weeks, the water levels began to drop noticeably. The once lush gardens surrounding the HOA president's lavish lakefront home, which heavily relied on the high water table, started wilting. Margaret was livid. She called emergency HOA meetings, hired hydrologists of her own, and even tried to file complaints with the county. But every legal challenge she threw at me bounced off the mountain of documentation I had prepared. The HOA board was divided. Some members feared legal consequences, others backed Margaret's aggressive stance. But nature doesn't negotiate. As the lake levels continued to decline, the once pristine lawns turned yellow, the ornate flower beds withered, and, most satisfying of all, Margaret's meticulously curated garden began to sink into a growing swamp caused by the altered groundwater flow. The HOA tried to pin the blame on me publicly, claiming I was sabotaging community property. But the local news ran the full story after James provided them with the legal documents proving my full rights to the water source. Public opinion shifted rapidly. Many homeowners, previously supportive of Margaret's iron grip, now saw the HOA for what it truly was, a private fiefdom of control and overreach. In desperation, Margaret organized a town hall meeting to rally the community against me. The room was packed with HOA members, local residents, and curious outsiders who had heard of the growing scandal. Margaret, standing at the podium, launched into a dramatic speech filled with accusations, emotional appeals, and thinly veiled threats. When she finished, I calmly walked to the front of the room, holding a thick folder of legal documents. I presented the timeline of events, the permits, the water rights deeds, and the engineering reports. I explained how the HOA had illegally blocked Grandpa's access, how they refused every attempt at compromise, and how every action I took was within my full legal rights. The room was silent as I spoke. The weight of truth hung heavily in the air. When I finished, James stood and addressed the crowd as well, making it clear that any further attempts to harass me or my grandfather would result in immediate legal action against the HOA and its leadership personally. The silence was finally broken by murmurs of agreement and a few scattered claps. Some HOA members quietly slipped out of the room, no longer willing to support Margaret's reign of terror. The meeting ended not with a vote against me, but with the beginning of an internal revolt against Margaret. In the weeks that followed, more HOA members resigned. Margaret tried to cling to her position, but the writing was on the wall. A formal petition circulated, and within a month, she was voted out as president. The new leadership immediately removed the gate blocking Grandpa's lake access and issued a formal apology. They even offered to cover the costs of restoring any damage caused by the previous administration's overreach. Grandpa, for the first time in months, walked down that old dirt road, fishing pole in hand, tears welling in his eyes as he gazed out over the lake. I could have stopped there, but Margaret's arrogance still left a bitter taste. My diverted reservoir now thrived, teeming with fish and becoming a new attraction for local wildlife. Meanwhile, Margaret's former estate struggled with swampy grounds and declining property values. She eventually sold her home at a significant loss and left the community entirely. The HOA, now under new leadership, learned a valuable lesson about respecting property rights and not underestimating the resolve of those they seek to bully. Grandpa and I returned to our peaceful life, enjoying our lake and the newly restored access road. We hosted barbecues, invited neighbors who had once stood silently during the conflict, and slowly rebuilt the sense of community that Margaret had tried so hard to control. The scars of the battle remained, but they served as a reminder of the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter how powerful the opposition may seem. And every time I saw Grandpa cast his fishing line into the calm waters, I knew we had not only reclaimed our rights but secured our legacy for generations to come. Months later, as our reservoir flourished, local wildlife blossomed around it. Rare birds nested along the banks, drawing the attention of environmental groups that praised our conservation efforts. The state even designated a portion of my property as a protected habitat, adding further legal reinforcement to my ownership. As word spread, the community's perspective shifted. Former HOA members who had once sided with Margaret approached us with newfound respect, admitting that they had been misled and manipulated. James and I hosted an educational seminar, inviting local homeowners to learn about water rights, property laws, and how to peacefully coexist without overreaching authority. The turnout was larger than expected. People asked questions, shared stories of their own HOA struggles, and left with a better understanding of their rights and responsibilities. The event marked a turning point, fostering a more cooperative atmosphere throughout Willow Creek. Meanwhile, Margaret's downfall didn't end with her departure from the neighborhood. Investigations revealed financial irregularities during her tenure as HOA president. She faced charges for misappropriating HOA funds and was ultimately convicted of embezzlement. Her sentencing sent a powerful message to anyone who might consider abusing their authority. With Margaret gone and the HOA reformed, Grandpa and I continued to improve the ranch. We expanded the fishing docks, created nature trails, and even opened a small visitors center to educate people about responsible land stewardship. Our once private battles had transformed into a community asset, drawing visitors from neighboring towns who admired the beauty and resilience of Willow Creek. As the years passed, the ranch became a symbol of perseverance, justice, and harmony. Families gathered for picnics, children played by the water's edge, and Grandpa shared his fishing wisdom with eager young anglers. The lake, once a battleground, now reflected the unity and strength of a community that had learned to respect individual rights while embracing collective well-being. On quiet evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Grandpa and I would sit by the water, reminiscing about the challenges we overcame. The gentle lapping of the waves and the chorus of crickets served as a soothing reminder that peace, once hard won, was now firmly secured. Our legacy was no longer just a personal victory, but a beacon of hope for others facing similar struggles, proving that with determination, integrity, and unwavering resolve, even the most daunting battles could be won. Despite everything that had transpired, peace on our ranch remained fragile. Though Margaret had been ousted, her departure left behind small embers of resentment among a handful of stubborn HOA loyalists who refused to fully accept the new leadership's decisions. As Grandpa and I worked to restore and improve the property, whispers continued in backyards and coffee shops. Some claimed we had manipulated the law to crush the HOA. Others whispered that we would eventually overreach ourselves. But while they gossiped, we stayed focused. Our reservoir flourished as both a symbol of victory and an environmental gem, with visiting biologists marveling at the diversity of birds, fish, and plant life thriving under responsible stewardship. Local news began to shift their narrative, celebrating how a once-divided community had turned a power struggle into an example of conservation and neighborly cooperation. Grandpa, who had initially resisted publicity, eventually warmed to the idea of sharing his story for the benefit of others. We were invited to speak at regional landowner conferences, and James often accompanied us to explain the intricacies of property rights that most average homeowners never understood until conflict struck. More importantly, our ranch became a local educational hub where school field trips arrived to teach children about watersheds, responsible land management, and the dangers of unchecked authority. But the final chapter of our battle with the HOA wasn't over yet. The most dangerous conflicts often arise when desperation blinds reason. Unbeknownst to us, a small faction of former HOA board members secretly conspired to reclaim some form of leverage over us. Their plan wasn't legal this time. It was personal and reckless. One humid summer evening, as we prepared for a barbecue, gathering with neighbors, I received a phone call from the county fire department. A suspicious fire had broken out along the northern boundary of our property near the old growth woods. My stomach twisted as I jumped into the truck with Grandpa and sped toward the scene. By the time we arrived, several fire trucks were already battling the blaze. The dry underbrush fueled the flames, and though the fire crews contained it before, it reached the main ranch buildings. The damage was significant. Thankfully, no one was injured, but acres of pristine forest were scorched. The investigation began immediately. While the fire department suspected arson, they couldn't publicly name any suspects without solid proof. But I had my suspicions. Met with James the next morning. "We need to tighten security even more," I said grimly. "This wasn't just a random act." James nodded, already reviewing the footage from our extensive security camera network. After hours of cross-referencing timestamps and matching vehicle records, we identified a suspicious pickup truck parked near the tree line shortly before the fire began. The license plate belonged to Derek Simmons, a former HOA board member who had been one of Margaret's staunchest supporters. Armed with this evidence, James coordinated with law enforcement. Within days, warrants were issued. Derek and 2 accomplices were arrested and charged with arson, trespassing, and reckless endangerment. The evidence was overwhelming. Gasoline, cans, fire starters, and text messages discussing how one good fire might scare the rancher back into compliance. News of the arrests spread like wildfire, ironically, and crushed any lingering support for the old HOA faction. The remaining HOA loyalists quickly distanced themselves, fearing legal consequences of their own. The new HOA leadership publicly condemned the acts, reiterating their commitment to lawful governance and property rights. Their statement was the final nail in the coffin for the old guard. As the criminal case proceeded, the judge showed little leniency. Derek and his accomplices received lengthy prison sentences, serving as a stern warning to anyone else considering illegal retaliation. With the legal threats neutralized, Grandpa and I turned our attention to restoring the damaged portions of the property. Volunteers from the community, including some former skeptics, arrived to help replant trees and rebuild fences. The outpouring of support was heartening, signaling that the healing process for Willow Creek had begun in earnest. The restoration project became a community-wide effort. Local businesses donated supplies, and school groups participated in reforestation drives. Over time, the burned areas transformed into thriving meadows and new forest growth, a powerful symbol of resilience and renewal. As the seasons changed, so did the atmosphere in Willow Creek. The HOA, once viewed as an oppressive force, rebranded itself into a cooperative organization focused on maintaining common areas, resolving neighborly disputes peacefully, and protecting the environment. James was even invited to host educational workshops for the HOA board to ensure they operated within the law and respected homeowners' rights. It was a complete reversal from the hostile days under Margaret's rule. Meanwhile, Grandpa's old dirt road to the lake remained wide open, now upgraded with gravel to allow safer access for visitors. The fishing docks flourished, drawing families from across the county. Nature trails weaved around the reservoir, guiding hikers through blooming wildflowers, chirping songbirds, and scenic overlooks. By spring, a state senator who had followed our case proposed legislation inspired by our experience, requiring all HOAs statewide to provide greater transparency, limits on enforcement powers, and mandatory education on property rights for all board members. The bill passed overwhelmingly, protecting countless other homeowners from facing the kind of unchecked HOA overreach we had endured. Our victory rippled far beyond our little ranch. Grandpa, who once feared that his golden years would be consumed by conflict, now found himself enjoying his land fully for the first time in decades. We often sat by the lake, watching sunsets together, sipping coffee as the frogs croaked and fish leapt from the water. The distant echoes of those bitter conflicts faded into the calm of the present, but even as peace settled, I remained vigilant. Land, once threatened, can always attract new challenges if one grows complacent. That's why I continued working with James to secure every legal avenue: easements, mineral rights, water rights, air rights, ensuring that no future HOA president, county official, or private entity could ever again threaten our legacy. Eventually, the ranch became something even bigger than we had imagined. A nature conservancy partnered with us to create educational programs, and a small visitors center opened to serve as both a museum of our battle and a beacon of education on property rights and environmental stewardship. Thousands of visitors came each year, learning not just about wildlife, but about standing up for justice and responsible land management. Children planted trees where the fire had once burned, while seniors picnicked under shade trees we had once feared would be lost. Even some of the early HOA residents who once opposed us now joined our efforts, having seen firsthand the dangerous consequences of unchecked authority and petty personal agendas. In the end, our battle with the HOA taught us that standing your ground wasn't just about resisting control. It was about preserving what matters for future generations. Grandpa and I had safeguarded not just our land, but a community's soul. On one particularly serene morning, as mist rolled gently off, the reservoir surface and songbirds greeted the dawn, Grandpa placed his weathered hand on my shoulder. "You know," he said softly, "I never imagined that losing access to the lake would lead to all this." I smiled, taking in the beauty surrounding us. "Neither did I, Grandpa. But sometimes the worst fights bring out the best victories." And as we cast our lines into the clear, calm water, the ripples carried forward, not just across the surface of the lake, but across the entire legacy we had built. One battle at a time, now at peace, at last.